Entrepreneurship today isn't just about starting companies. It's really about creating new identities and possibilities. Entrepreneurship gives people a way to transform their own lives and often even their whole communities. What I have seen in my own research is that entrepreneurship is also a journey of self-discovery and transformational growth. For example, in my study of women from very humble backgrounds in China, they never imagined themselves as business owners and suddenly were given a chance to start their business and reimagine who they could become. So I really see entrepreneurship not only as economic activity, but also a pathway to resilience and transformation. In a world that is changing rapidly, which can bring lots of uncertainty and anxiety to people, I really believe entrepreneurship gives people a sense of hope, direction, and purpose. So to anyone, becoming an entrepreneur naturally brings up questions like, who am I as an entrepreneur? What kind of entrepreneur do I really want to be? And these are identity-based questions, and they shape how people build their business. Identity matters for everyone who becomes an entrepreneur, but it can be especially important for those who never imagined themselves as entrepreneurs. For them, it's a huge identity shift. And that can raise tough doubts like, am I really cut out for this? What does this role even mean? So in my study of 61 women in China, I found that much of their self-doubt came from identities they already carried, such as being from poor rural backgrounds, having limited education, or being bound by family obligations, such as childcare. These identities sometimes clash with their aspiration to be an entrepreneur. And that's why identity is so central. It determines whether people can see entrepreneurship as something truly meant for them and how they find ways to navigate the journey successfully. In our research, we found that when people feel like parts of who they are in conflict with the notion of being entrepreneurs, it can feel like an invisible roadblock. For example, these women I study from poor family background with limited education can find it hard to imagine themselves becoming a successful business owners. But there are ways through. Some entrepreneurs would downplay these old identities, such as having grown up poor or not finishing high school, and others would reinterpret them. For example, one woman I interviewed reframed her rural upbringing not as a disadvantage, but as proof she could eat bitterness, meaning she could endure hardships, and that became a real strength in running a business. What also helps is reflecting on their past failures and paying attention to emotions such as self-doubts rather than ignoring these emotions. When these emotions surface, talking with mentors, peers, or supporters who understand can help entrepreneurs see that such feelings often come from their self-perceptions, which they actually have the power to reshape and overcome. And these steps can turn identity conflict into a source of new self-discovery and growth, and help entrepreneurs find a path that feels really authentic and meaningful. In our research, we found that when people face identity conflict in entrepreneurship, they often follow one of three paths. The first is what we call the elevation path. These people will push aside their doubts or any other negative emotions such as fear, almost like fake it until you make it. And eventually they will embrace the entrepreneurial identity. And the second path is what we call experimentation path. These people, they would test, they learn, they seek support when they feel the negative emotions, and gradually build their confidence, often by finding strengths in their disadvantaged backgrounds. And then there is a third path that we call entrenchment. These people feel overwhelmed by fear or self-doubt and eventually walk away, but they do it out of their own choice. A big part of this is what we call inter-identity work, which involves changing our perception of how our various identities relate, from being in conflict to being compatible or even synergistic. For example, women from rural backgrounds often view their upbringing as clashing with an entrepreneurial identity. But transformation happens when they reinterpret their background as a source of resilience, resourcefulness, and grit, which are qualities that directly fuel their entrepreneurial success. People from marginalized backgrounds often carry deep self-doubts, and even small setbacks can feel very overwhelming to them. Our research shows that two things really matter in helping them succeed. The first is how they make sense of past failures. Do they see those failures as proof that they cannot succeed, or do they view them as learning experiences? And the second is whether they have someone nearby, a mentor, a peer, or supporter who can help them manage difficult emotions like fear or self-doubt and reframe their struggles in a more positive light. And that's where support programs and incubators can make a really big difference. Some incubators working with women in rural India, for example, that I've heard, have begun to integrate emotional and identity-based training. Instead of focusing only on providing funding or enhancing technical skills, they also help participants process setbacks, regulate their negative emotions, and reinterpret their backgrounds as source of resilience and strength. When that happens, entrepreneurship can truly become a way to unlock possibilities and rewrite life stories for anyone.